The galaxy had been living in quiet fear for many years. Between the stars, two great powers had faced each other. The Virellan Empire, proud and ancient, and humanity, young but full of fire. For decades, their ships had stared at each other across cold space, weapons ready, waiting for one wrong move to start a war that could destroy entire worlds. But something unexpected happened. Both sides grew tired of endless tension. Trade had stopped, travel had slowed, and people across both species longed for peace. So when the Virellan Emperor, Kylor of the Crystal Throne, proposed a union between his daughter and a human officer, the galaxy held its breath. The plan was simple, a political marriage meant to unite two civilizations. Yet to the Virellans, the idea was almost impossible to accept. To them, humans were unpredictable, emotional, and far too bold. The Virellans lived by logic and control. Humans lived by heart and willpower. The differences were too many. But Emperor Kylor believed that peace was worth every risk. His daughter, Princess Saralyn, did not agree. Saralyn had grown up in the shining cities of Virellan Prime, surrounded by silver spires and glowing crystal gardens. Her people were tall, elegant, with shimmering skin that reflected light like liquid glass. They spoke through soft tones and graceful movements. To them, anger and shouting were signs of weakness. So when she learned she was to marry a human, her heart filled with dread. Humans were loud, emotional, and full of strange energy. Their faces moved too much, their eyes burned too bright. Saralyn had seen recordings of them. Soldiers in metal armor, shouting in battle, laughing in storms, and crying over fallen comrades. To her, they were chaos in living form, and now one of them would become her groom. The human's name was Commander Ethan Voss. He had served as a diplomat and a soldier in the Terran fleet. Many said he was brave but gentle, a man who preferred peace over war. Still, the Virellan court viewed him with silent suspicion. To them, no human could ever truly control their wild spirit. The day Ethan's ship arrived on Virellan Prime, the skies were clear and glowing with the twin suns. Thousands gathered to witness history. The massive docking platforms buzzed with activity as his sleek Terran ship. The horizon's light landed near the royal palace. Saralyn stood beside her father, wearing her royal veil made of thin, glowing crystal threads. It covered half her face, hiding her emotions. Her heart beat fast, though her face showed calm. Around her, Virellan nobles whispered quietly, wondering what kind of creature a human groom would be. Then, the ship's ramp opened. Out stepped Ethan Voss, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the dark uniform of a Terran commander. His hair was a deep brown, his eyes sharp and clear. But it wasn't his size or face that caught Saralyn's attention. It was the way he moved, steady, confident, and respectful. He didn't look around like a conqueror. He walked like someone carrying a great responsibility. When he reached the royal platform, he stopped and bowed deeply to Emperor Kylor. His voice, deep and calm, echoed through the translator fields. "Your Majesty," he said, "I come not as a soldier, but as a bridge between our people." The words were simple, but powerful. The crowd murmured in surprise. Most had expected arrogance or pride, but Ethan showed humility and honor. Saralyn's eyes narrowed behind her veil. She did not trust him. Not yet. When Ethan finally looked at her, their gazes met for the first time. For a brief moment, the noise of the crowd faded. She saw warmth in his expression, something unfamiliar to her. Not power, not fear, but respect. He didn't try to speak to her immediately. Instead, he placed his right hand over his chest, the Terran sign of greeting and peace. Saralyn felt her pulse quicken. She turned away before anyone noticed. The ceremony that followed was full of grand speeches and diplomatic promises. Human and Virellan leaders stood side by side, smiling for the holocameras that sent their image across the stars. But behind the smiles, tension hung like invisible smoke. Every move, every word, could decide the future of two species. After the ceremony, Saralyn was expected to meet Ethan in a private chamber to exchange the symbols of union, a ritual from both cultures. She dreaded it. Her attendants whispered encouragement, telling her to stay calm and remember her duty. When the doors opened, Ethan was already there, waiting quietly. He stood by the window watching the twin suns sink below the horizon, painting the city in gold and violet. Saralyn walked in, her posture flawless, her veil glimmering like moonlight. "Princess Saralyn," Ethan greeted softly. It's an honor to meet you at last. His voice was gentle, almost too human. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Commander, she said finally, her tone cool and distant. Our union is for peace. Let us hope it achieves that purpose. He smiled slightly. I hope for that too, Your Highness. More than anything, there was a long silence between them. The room was filled with faint light from the twin suns, reflecting on her crystalline veil and his dark uniform. Two beings from different worlds, bound by politics, not by choice. Finally, Ethan stepped forward and offered a small metallic insignia, the symbol of the Terran fleet. In my culture, he explained, we exchange tokens to mark trust. This belonged to my first mission as a peacekeeper. I offer it to you as a promise that I will protect this peace, and you. Saralyn hesitated. No Virellan would ever wear a symbol of another race. Yet something in his words, or perhaps his steady gaze, made her pause. Slowly she extended her hand, delicate and glowing under the light, and took the insignia. Then I offer this, she said, producing a small crystal pendant. It represents clarity and truth. May our path remain clear. They exchanged the gifts in silence. It was a simple act, but the galaxy watched it as if it were a miracle. Outside, the media broadcast their image across countless systems. Commentators spoke of hope and history, but inside the royal palace, Saralyn's thoughts were stormy. She couldn't understand this human, this man who smiled even when surrounded by distrust. When the meeting ended, she walked through the palace halls, her attendants following. She should have felt relieved, but instead she felt restless. His words echoed in her mind. I will protect this peace and you, strange creature, she murmured to herself. That night she stood on her balcony, gazing at the stars. Somewhere among them was Earth, the human homeworld. She imagined their oceans, their blue skies, their wild storms. Perhaps that was why they were so emotional, she thought. They lived in chaos, yet found beauty in it. She wondered if humans were really as dangerous as she had been taught. Or perhaps they were simply different. Meanwhile, in his guest chamber across the palace, Ethan looked out at the alien city that glittered like ice under the moons. He could still feel the weight of her crystal pendant in his hand, cool, flawless, almost alive. He understood her fear. To her people, he was a walking threat, but he also knew something about fear. It could build walls or it could build bridges. He had faced war before. He had seen soldiers of every kind, but something about this mission felt different. He wasn't here to win. He was here to understand. I'll earn her trust, he whispered to himself, even if it takes a lifetime. Far above the palace, ships from both sides patrolled the skies, silent guardians of a fragile peace. The galaxy waited to see if this alliance would last or fall apart like the ones before it. But in that quiet night, something small and unseen began to change. A spark of curiosity between two souls who were never meant to meet. And though neither of them knew it yet, that spark would soon grow into something that could change not just their worlds but the fate of the entire galaxy. The next morning, the sun rose over Virellan Prime, painting the city in pale gold and soft violet. Princess Saralyn stood by her window, staring at the bustling streets below. The palace was alive with activity. Courtiers whispered rumors about the human Groom, some fearful, some curious. But for Saralyn, the fear was real and personal. She was terrified of the man who had come to claim her hand in marriage. She dressed slowly, her movements deliberate and graceful. Today she would meet Commander Ethan Voss again, not for ceremony, not for diplomacy, but for lessons in preparation. Part of the marriage involved learning each other's customs. Ethan would teach her about humans, and she would teach him about Virellan society. It was supposed to be simple. But Saralyn felt a storm inside. Humans were unpredictable. They were loud, emotional, and too physical. Their hands were too big, their touches too forceful. She had heard stories of human passion, not just in love but in anger and battle. And that terrified her. Ethan, meanwhile, waited patiently in the learning chamber. A room filled with holographic displays, soft light, and wide windows that opened to the palace gardens. He had spent the night reviewing Virellan etiquette and culture, determined to show respect. He knew this was more than a marriage. It was a mission for peace, and he could not fail. When Saralyn entered, the room seemed smaller, charged with tension. She wore a flowing gown of silver and blue, her crystalline veil glinting. Ethan stood and bowed slightly, keeping his distance. "Good morning, Princess Saralyn," he said, his voice calm. "I hope you slept well." Saralyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "I slept as well as one can before being married to a human." Her words were sharp but not unkind. They were her shield. Ethan nodded as if expecting it. "I understand your hesitation. Humans can be surprising. But I promise I mean no harm." She narrowed her eyes but said nothing. Silence filled the room for a long moment, broken only by the faint hum of the palace machinery. Ethan began the day by explaining human customs, greetings, gestures, meals, even songs. He spoke slowly and clearly, showing each action carefully. Saralyn watched, curious despite herself. Some gestures were awkward, but others, like a gentle nod or a bow, reminded her of her own people. "You humans are very expressive," she finally said, a trace of amusement in her voice. "Every motion seems to carry meaning." Ethan smiled. "Expression is how we connect, Princess. It helps others understand what we feel, even before words." Her veil twitched slightly, a subtle sign among Vireyans of surprise or interest. It was a small victory, he noticed. After the lesson, they walked into the palace gardens. The gardens were vast, filled with plants that shimmered under Virellan sunlight. Some trees glowed faintly. Pools reflected the twin suns. Saralyn had walked here countless times, but today it felt different. She felt a presence beside her, strong, steady, human, and it made her heart beat faster than she expected. "Your Highness," Ethan said softly, "may I show you a human game?" She raised an eyebrow. "A game? Humans play games in serious matters?" "They play games in every matter," he replied, laughing lightly. "It teaches strategy, patience, and cooperation. You may find it enlightening." Saralyn hesitated, but curiosity overcame caution. She allowed him to guide her through a simple strategy game, projected in holograms above the fountain. At first she was cautious, but soon she noticed Ethan's careful way of explaining, his patience, and how he corrected mistakes without criticism. By the end of the afternoon, Saralyn felt something she had never expected: respect. This human who she had feared was not reckless or crude. He was precise, thoughtful, and attentive, but peace was fragile. The moment the palace gates closed, trouble arrived. A group of rogue Virellans, extremists who opposed the alliance, had slipped past the city's outer defenses. They carried weapons of a technology even the royal guard had not seen before. Their target was clear: disrupt the marriage and embarrass the princess and her human groom. Saralyn sensed danger before anyone could react. She moved swiftly, calling out orders to the guards. But even with elite warriors at her side, the attackers were fast, using shadows and speed to strike. Ethan, alerted by the alarm, dashed to the gardens. He saw Saralyn cornered near a glowing water fountain, her guards struggling against multiple attackers. Without hesitation, he drew a human combat staff, simple but deadly in the hands of someone trained in battle. He moved like water and fire combined, defending the princess while keeping her unharmed. One attacker lunged at her and Ethan struck, spinning with precision and disarming the rogue. He shielded Saralyn with his body, taking hits that would have injured a Virellan many times over. The fight ended as quickly as it had begun. The intruders fled when palace reinforcements arrived. Smoke lingered, and the soft glow of the twin suns returned, washing over the shaken garden. Saralyn stared at Ethan, breathless. She had seen many warriors in her life, skilled, elegant, deadly, but none had moved like him, not with violence but with purpose and care. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I only did what any human would do," Ethan replied humbly. "No one should be hurt on my watch, especially you." For the first time, Saralyn felt a flutter of warmth inside her. Her fear did not vanish entirely, but it changed. It no longer screamed of terror. Instead, it whispered curiosity and wonder. That night, she could not sleep. She replayed the events in her mind, the rush of danger, the attack, and the calm determination in Ethan's eyes. She could not understand how someone could face fear so directly yet remain gentle. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his room, wiping the dust from his uniform. He thought about Saralyn's reaction, the slight change in her tone, the way her veil trembled when she spoke. He understood that trust would take time, but for the first time he felt hope. Over the following days, lessons continued. Ethan taught her simple human practices, how to eat in a relaxed way, how to laugh without fear, and even how to tell small personal stories to share trust. Saralyn resisted at first, stiff and formal, but gradually cracks appeared in her icy demeanor. She began to ask questions, not formal or political questions, but personal ones. "Why do humans smile when they are sad?" she asked one evening. Ethan explained softly, "Because it reminds them that sadness does not last forever. It is hope in disguise." Saralyn contemplated the words, turning the idea over in her mind. The concept was foreign, yet somehow beautiful. Humans, she realized, did not fight only with weapons. They fought with hope, laughter, and love. Her guards whispered among themselves, noting the change in the princess. "The human is not as terrible as we thought," one said quietly. Saralyn did not reply. She was learning, slowly, carefully, to see a world beyond Virellan caution. One evening, a new challenge arrived. A diplomatic delegation from a neighboring system came to test the peace treaty. They looked down upon humans and sought to embarrass Ethan. The ambassador spoke sharply, mocking the humans' intelligence, strength, and courage. Saralyn watched silently, her hands gripping the balcony railing. Her chest tightened with indignation. She could not let this continue. Stepping forward, she spoke with a calm authority that filled the hall. "Commander Ethan Voss has proven himself to me and to my people. Humans are strong, not just in muscle, but in heart. Their courage shines brighter than a dying star. You would do well to respect that." The room fell silent. Even the ambassador, used to intimidation, could not reply. The human and Virellan eyes met. Ethan bowed slightly, a mixture of gratitude and respect in his gaze. Saralyn's voice had not only defended him but also declared a new standard. Humans were not to be underestimated. That night, in the quiet of her chamber, Saralyn removed her veil. It was a sacred gesture, one reserved for those she truly trusted. Her heart beat faster as she held the crystal pendant she had given Ethan earlier. She imagined his calm, warm eyes. The fear she had carried for weeks did not vanish, but it softened. The human was no longer a threat. He was something else, something she did not yet understand, but something she wanted to learn about. And somewhere deep inside, a small spark ignited, curiosity, courage, and perhaps the first hint of affection. The days passed slowly on Virellan Prime, yet each day brought something new. Princess Saralyn found herself thinking about the human groom, Commander Ethan Voss, more than she cared to admit. At first it had been fear, raw, sharp, and icy. But now the fear had softened into something more complicated. Ethan was patient, gentle, and careful, but also bold and strong when it mattered. He was a man of contrasts, and that contrast fascinated her. The more she observed him, the more she realized that humans carried a power that Virellans could not understand. A combination of courage, hope, and stubborn determination. That morning, the palace was quiet. Most of the attendants had been dismissed for the day, leaving the princess free to wander. Ethan was already in the training chamber, waiting for their morning lesson. He looked up as she entered. "Good morning, Princess Saralyn," he said, smiling softly. "Did you sleep well?" "I did," she replied, though the word sounded formal. She did not know why, but she felt lighter in his presence. Perhaps it was the calm in his voice, or the way he never demanded anything from her. "Today," Ethan began, "I want to teach you about something humans value deeply. Stories." Saralyn raised an eyebrow. "Stories? You speak of war and peace, and yet you focus on stories?" Ethan chuckled. "Stories are how humans remember, how we teach, how we connect. They carry wisdom, joy, sorrow, and everything a heart can hold. And they help build trust." Saralyn listened carefully as he told her small stories of Earth, a child who saved a stranger from drowning, a scientist who risked everything to save her people, a soldier who forgave an enemy to prevent greater harm. Each story was short, simple, but filled with emotion. She realized something unexpected. Humans were brave not because they were strong, but because they cared deeply. Their strength came from their hearts, not from their bodies or weapons. Curiosity bloomed inside her. She wanted to know more. After the lessons, Ethan suggested a walk in the palace gardens. Saralyn hesitated. The gardens were familiar, but her feelings made even familiar places strange. Yet she followed him. "Princess," he said as they walked beneath glowing trees, "May I ask you a question?" Saralyn tilted her head. "You may. Why are your people so wary of humans?" She considered the question. Because humans are unpredictable. They feel too much. They fight too much. And they think too much about themselves. Ethan nodded. Perhaps that is true. But sometimes what makes humans unpredictable also makes us brave. We face danger we cannot control. We face it anyway. She was silent for a moment, thinking about the attack from the extremist, the way he had protected her. Even then, his movements had been controlled, careful, and precise. There had been no unnecessary force, only purpose. "Perhaps," she said finally, "I judged humans too quickly." Ethan smiled, a quiet, warm smile. It is easy to judge what we do not understand. The day passed peacefully, but the calm could not last. News arrived that a rogue delegation from a neighboring system planned to test the human-Virellan alliance. Their goal was to discredit both Ethan and Saralyn. The princess felt a knot in her stomach. The last time humans were insulted in her presence, she had spoken up, defending him. But this time, she feared the challenge would be harsher. The delegation arrived at the palace the next morning, their ships gleaming in the twin suns. The ambassador was a tall, thin creature from the Zareth system, known for their sharp tongue and biting words. He looked Ethan up and down, sneering. "Is this the human they have chosen to wed our princess?" he said. "He looks ordinary." Ethan kept his posture straight. "I am what I am, and I serve a purpose greater than appearances." Saralyn's hands clenched. She could feel her people's eyes on her, waiting for her reaction. For the first time, she stepped forward, speaking in a calm but powerful voice. "Commander Ethan Voss has proven his courage and wisdom," she said. "He has defended me and my people. You would do well to respect him or learn from him." The assembly was silent. The Zareth ambassador, unused to being challenged, glared but said nothing. Ethan bowed slightly, gratitude in his eyes, but said nothing in words. The silence carried the weight of respect and of warning. That night the palace was quiet again, but Saralyn could not rest. She wandered into the gardens alone, carrying her crystal pendant. She thought of Ethan, his calm presence, his human courage. A strange warmth spread through her chest. It was no longer fear. Later, Ethan found her there. She had not noticed him approach. "You should not be wandering alone," he said softly. "I am not afraid," she replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "I know," he said, "but sometimes even the bravest need support." They walked in silence, side by side. The stars began to shine faintly above the palace, reflecting off the glowing leaves. Saralyn felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time, she did not see him as a threat. She saw him as someone who could understand and protect her. "You humans are very different," she said finally. "Your strength is not in your body or in your weapons. It is in your heart." Ethan looked at her and smiled. "That is the most accurate description of humans I have heard from an alien." The princess laughed softly, the sound almost foreign to her own ears. The laughter made Ethan smile wider, though he did not comment. He only continued to walk beside her, letting her lead the way through the shimmering garden paths. Over the next several days, their bond grew. Ethan continued to teach her about humans, their music, their art, their strange sense of humor. Saralyn began to tell him about Virellan customs, their rituals, their strict codes of honor. It was a slow, careful exchange. Each learned to see the other's world not as a threat, but as a gift. One evening, during a quiet lesson on human songs, Ethan placed his hand lightly over a holographic instrument and played a simple melody. Saralyn listened, captivated. She had never heard anything like it. The tune carried both sorrow and hope. "Humans find beauty even in sadness," Ethan explained. "We remember, but we also dream." Saralyn felt a stirring she could not name. She wanted to remove her veil to see him fully, but it was forbidden, a sacred gesture of trust. Yet the temptation grew. Later, alone in her chamber, she finally lifted the veil. She held the crystal pendant close, thinking of Ethan's calm, strong hands, the gentle way he moved, the care in his voice. Her fear melted a little, not entirely, and she was still cautious. But the icy walls she had built around herself were cracking. She realized that humans were not the monsters she had imagined. They were unpredictable, yes, but in ways that could inspire courage, trust, and even love. Ethan, for his part, felt a similar change. He had faced countless challenges in his life, but none so profound as earning the trust of a princess of another world. And yet the quiet moments and shared laughter, stories, and the simple act of walking together had shown him a truth he had not expected. He did not see Virelans as enemies, nor Sarah Lynn as untouchable royalty. He saw a soul who, like him, sought peace, understanding, and hope. But the galaxy was not ready to leave danger behind. Rumors of another attack, stronger and more organized, reached the palace. Insurgents from a distant system sought to destroy the fragile alliance. The peace treaty, already delicate, now faced a test that would force both human and Virellan to act as one. Sarah Lynn and Ethan stood together in the garden that night, silent and aware. The twin suns had set and the first stars appeared. Their hands brushed briefly, a touch light, respectful yet electric. Sarah Lynn did not pull away. Instead, she held her hand still, feeling the warmth of the human beside her. In that simple connection, fear gave way to something new: trust, curiosity, and perhaps the first stirrings of affection. Ethan did not speak. He simply let the moment exist, understanding the significance of the gesture. To her people it was sacred. To him it was a sign that their worlds, though different, could find unity. And in the quiet night, under the twin moons of Virellan Prime, a bond was formed, the fragile, yet unbreakable. The princess who had once feared her human groom now looked at him with hope, respect, and cautious admiration. The galaxy waited, unaware that the strongest weapon in the coming conflict would not be ships, lasers, or diplomacy. It would be the human heart and the alien trust it had begun to awaken. The night sky over Virellan Prime was unusually dark. Twin moons hung low, casting silver light over the crystal towers of the palace. Normally the city shimmered with soft energy, but tonight tension hung thick in the air. Rumors had reached the royal court. A fleet of insurgents opposed to the human-Virellan alliance was approaching. Their intent was clear: sabotage the peace ceremony and destroy the fragile bond forming between Princess Sarah Lynn and Commander Ethan Voss. Sarah Lynn stood on the balcony of her chamber, staring at the horizon. Her hands clenched the railing as fear and determination battled within her. She had come a long way since the day she first met Ethan, from icy distrust to cautious trust, and now, to something deeper she dared not name aloud. Ethan appeared silently at her side. He had been surveying the outer defenses, planning for the worst. "Princess," he said softly, "this will be dangerous, but we face it together." Her eyes met his, and for the first time she did not feel terror. She felt confidence, inspired by the human who had shown her courage without cruelty, strength without arrogance, and care without hesitation. Together, they descended to the palace war room. Holographic displays showed the approaching fleet, sleek ships armed with advanced weaponry, moving faster than any Virellan patrol craft could intercept. The palace guards, trained for decades to defend their ruler, were tense but disciplined. Ethan moved among them, not as a commander giving orders, but as a teacher guiding students. He pointed out weaknesses in the enemy formation, suggested defensive maneuvers, and coordinated both human and Virellan squads. Sarah Lynn observed him amazed. He was not just a soldier. He was a strategist, a leader, and a protector. The insurgents struck sooner than expected. Explosions shook the outer platforms and alarms blared across the palace. Smoke rose, colored in the glow of the energy shields. Chaos threatened, but Ethan remained calm. His presence steadied the palace defenders. "Princess," he said, gripping her hand firmly, "stay close to me. Trust me." She nodded, her earlier fear replaced with determination. Together they moved through the corridors, coordinating defenses, guiding injured guards to safety, and ensuring that civilians remained out of harm's way. The battle raged for hours. Ships clashed above the palace, energy beams slicing through the dark sky. On the ground, insurgents attempted infiltration, but every move they made was met with combined human-Virellan resistance. In the heat of the fight, Sarah Lynn saw a group of attackers breaking through the southern gate. They were heading straight for her chambers. Without hesitation, Ethan sprinted ahead, signaling Virellan guards to cover him. Sarah Lynn followed, feeling the thrill of danger, but also a strange sense of trust she had never known. When they reached the attackers, Ethan drew his combat staff, sleek, simple, and deadly in his hands. He moved like water, deflecting strikes, disarming opponents, and protecting Cerilyn at every turn. For the first time, she felt not just admiration, but awe. This human whom she had feared for so long was now her shield, her partner in battle. One of the attackers lunged at Cerilyn from behind. Time slowed as Ethan reacted. He spun, striking the intruder with precision, and shielded her from harm. She felt the warmth of his body press briefly against hers. Her pulse quickened, but she did not retreat. Instead, she reached for his hand, steadying herself. The moment was brief but powerful. Fear had melted, replaced with trust, courage, and connection. When the battle finally ended, the palace was battered but intact. The insurgents had retreated, their fleet scattered by the combined efforts of human and Virelan forces. The defenders cheered, but Cerilyn's attention was on Ethan. He looked at her, exhausted but unbroken. His uniform was torn in places, his hands scraped, but his eyes held the same calm warmth she had come to rely on. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice trembling. "We saved each other," he replied. "Together." In that moment, Cerilyn understood something profound. Humans were not only capable of courage and strength, they could inspire others to be brave too. She had been terrified of him when they first met. Now she realized that fear was gone, replaced with admiration, respect, and a deep, unspoken bond. The next morning, the peace ceremony proceeded, but with a new energy. It was no longer just a political formality. It was a symbol of unity, a statement that two species, once divided by fear and misunderstanding, could stand together. As Cerilyn walked down the aisle, her veil removed, she felt the eyes of countless delegates and citizens on her, but she did not feel fear. She felt pride and strength grounded in the human beside her. Ethan offered his arm, and she took it without hesitation. When they reached the ceremonial platform, the leaders of both civilizations awaited. Holographic displays projected across the galaxy, broadcasting the historic event. Cerilyn and Ethan stood side by side, hands brushing lightly, a gesture that spoke louder than words. The ritual began. Symbols of both cultures were exchanged. Cerilyn placed her crystal pendant in Ethan's hand. He took it gently, then offered the Terran insignia he had first given her. They looked into each other's eyes, and in that simple touch, centuries of fear, suspicion, and doubt melted away. The audience watched in silence, witnessing not just a union, but a miracle of understanding and trust. Cerilyn's hand rested in Ethan's, feeling the warmth, steadiness, and reassurance of a human heart. And for the first time, she allowed herself to truly melt, not from fear, but from the realization that humans were capable of love, courage, and honor that transcended the stars. After the ceremony, they addressed the gathered citizens and delegates. Ethan spoke first, his voice calm and strong. "This union is not just between a human and a Virelan. It is a union between our peoples. We are stronger together than apart. If we can stand united, perhaps the galaxy can learn the same." Cerilyn stepped forward, her voice melodic and clear. "Fear once divided us, prejudice once blinded us, but today we choose trust. We choose unity. Together, humans and Virelans will face the future, not as enemies but as partners." The galaxy erupted in applause. Across star systems, broadcasts showed the image of a human and a Virelan princess, standing side by side, hands joined, symbols of hope, trust, and courage reflected in every eye. That night, in the quiet of their chamber, Cerilyn turned to Ethan. "You were right," she said softly. "Humans are not what I feared. You are extraordinary," Ethan smiled. "Extraordinary, perhaps, but not alone. You showed courage, too. Without your trust and strength, none of this would have been possible." Cerilyn took his hand in both of hers, feeling the warmth and steady pulse of a human heart. It was a connection beyond words, a bond forged in danger, respect, and understanding. "I was terrified of you at first," she admitted. "But now," she paused, searching for words, "I feel safe. And more than that, I feel connected." Ethan's smile softened, and he lifted her hand to his lips in a gesture of respect and affection. "And I feel the same," he said. "You are as strong as your people, and braver than anyone I have known." Outside, the twin moons rose higher, casting a silver glow over the palace. The galaxy, which had watched centuries of division, now witnessed a new beginning. Humans and Virelans were no longer strangers or enemies. They were partners, allies, friends. And for Princess Cerilyn, The human who had once terrified her had become someone she could trust completely. Someone who had shown her the power of the human heart. The alliance was more than political. It was personal, emotional, and eternal. As dawn broke over Virelin Prime, Ethan and Saralyn stood on the balcony, hand in hand. The city below shimmered with light and life. The galaxy stretched endlessly beyond. Together, they faced it, not with fear but with courage, understanding, and hope that humanity and all species could shine brighter together. For the princess who had once been terrified of her human groom, fear had melted completely at his first touch, and in its place burned a flame of trust. Courage and unity that could light the stars themselves. The story of two worlds, once divided, had reached its turning point, and the galaxy would never forget the human heart that changed everything.